I'm using a throwaway account because I just need to vent and maybe get some advice on a really crazy situation that went down on my honeymoon. I'm a 27-year-old woman, and I got married to my husband Jake, 30M, about a month ago. We planned a beautiful 2-week honeymoon in Hawaii, which was supposed to be a dream vacation for just the two of us. Emphasis on supposed to be, enter my in-laws. Specifically, my husband's parents, whom I'll call MIL, mother-in-law 58F, and FIL, father-in-law 60M, they are a lot. I've known them for as long as I've been with Jake. We've been together 3 years, and there have been some boundary issues in the past, but nothing like this. For some context, MIL and FEL are the kind of people who believe families should do everything together. They hate the idea of being left out of anything. They also have a bit of an entitlement streak. They often expect their adult kids to cater to them because we raised you, you owe us. Jake is somewhat used to their behavior, and admittedly in the past, he's had a hard time standing up to them. I've mostly grinned and borne it when they were mildly intrusive, like inviting themselves over with minimal notice or making snide comments if we went on a trip alone. I know, red flags, but I honestly never imagined they'd cross this line. So flash forward to our wedding day. It was wonderful, and at the reception, MIL was already making comments like, "Oh, Hawaii! We haven't been there since our own honeymoon." And, "You kids are so lucky, we need a vacation so badly." I thought it was just small talk or jealousy. We just smiled and moved on, not thinking much of it. We left for Hawaii 2 days after the wedding. We had our flights and hotel booked months in advance, a fancy resort that we'd splurged on as a once-in-a-lifetime treat. We arrive at the resort, exhausted and ecstatic, and check in at the front desk. The concierge says, "Oh, welcome back, Mr. and Mrs. Last name." We figured she was just referring to us being newlyweds. Nope. As we're getting our room keys, she adds, "Your parents checked in earlier today. I'll let them know you've arrived." I literally stopped and said, "I'm sorry, what? Our parents?" thinking I misheard. My first thought was that maybe she meant something like a honeymoon package where the hotel staff calls us Mom and Dad as a cute joke. I know, it makes no sense. I was just confused. But, no. She goes, "Yes, your parents. They're staying in the room next to yours. They said they're here to surprise you." My jaw must have hit the floor. Jake looked equally stunned. We sort of stammered to the concierge, "Oh, okay," and walked to our room in a daze, luggage in tow. Sure enough, as soon as we get to our room door, out pops MIL and FIL from the neighboring room, grinning like Cheshire cats. MIL practically squealed, "Surprise!" I was too stunned to respond for a moment. Meanwhile, FIL is clapping Jake on the back, saying, "Bet you didn't expect to see us here." My husband was clearly trying to process, and the first thing he said was, "Yeah, what are you guys doing here?" MIL laughed and said, "Well, we needed a vacation too. And what better place than Hawaii? We thought it'd be fun to spend it together." She said this as if this was the most normal thing in the world, as if she hadn't just announced that they had crashed our honeymoon. I finally found my voice and said, "I'm sorry, I'm just a bit confused. This was meant to be our honeymoon, just us." I tried to keep my tone polite, despite wanting to scream. MIL's smile faltered a tiny bit, and she replied, "Oh, of course, sweetie. We're not going to infringe, don't worry. We'll just be around. We won't get in your way." She said this while literally standing in our way. Phil chimed in, "Think of it as a family vacation. You two can do your couple stuff, and we'll do our stuff, and maybe meet up for dinners or sightseeing together. It'll be fun." At this point, I was internally raging, but I also didn't want to start our honeymoon off with a huge argument. Jake looked torn and kind of shell-shocked. He later told me he was so taken aback that he kind of went on autopilot. In the moment, he forced a smile and mumbled something like, wow, okay, that is a surprise." We all kind of stood there in awkward silence for a second. MIL then clapped her hands and said, "Alrighty, we'll let you lovebirds settle in. We're going to go grab a quick bite at the buffet. Let's meet up for dinner tonight. There's a great restaurant here. We already made a reservation for the 4 of us at 7. And off they went, practically skipping away while I'm still standing there with my face frozen in disbelief. Once they were out of earshot, I immediately turned to Jake and said, "Absolutely not. This is not happening." He just goes, I know. I'm so sorry. I don't know what they were thinking." I could see he was embarrassed and upset, but also that conflict avoidance side of him creeping in. "What do we do?" he asked me. I said we need to tell them this is not okay, and they need to leave, or at the very least we do our own thing separate from them. I was already dreading the idea of what this would turn into. If we didn't put our foot down, we were literally on our honeymoon, and his parents thought it was fine to not only vacation at the same spot, but also to insert themselves into our plans, making dinner reservations for us. A couple hours later, after we unpacked and tried to cool down a bit, we met them for that dinner. Part of me almost didn't want to show up, but we had to eat, and Jake thought maybe we should just do the one dinner and then lay down boundaries afterward to avoid a public confrontation. I agreed, but on the way to the restaurant I warned him, if they have any crazy ideas beyond just being at the resort, you need to shut it down. Dinner was, As soon as we sat down, it was clear MIL and FIL assumed they'd be tagging along for our whole honeymoon. They had a schedule of activities and everything. Tomorrow we rented a car to go to the other side of the island. We can all go snorkeling. We had our own plans to do a couple snorkeling tour the next day, which of course they knew about because we naively shared our general itinerary with them before, never imagining they'd literally follow us there. MIL went on, and the day after, we thought we'd try that famous hike together and maybe do a luau at night. Won't it be so fun to spend time together? She was beaming. I was kicking Jake under the table, shooting him, "Do something!" looks. He cleared his throat and tried, "Mom, Dad, this is really nice of you, but, this was supposed to be our honeymoon. Like, a trip for just us two. We kind of already made plans for just us." He even gave a little apologetic laugh, trying to keep it light. Well, MIL's face completely fell, as if this was brand new information. She said, "Oh, we know it's your honeymoon. And of course, you two need your romantic alone time. But you have 2 weeks here. You won't be, busy the entire time." She actually gave a little wink when she said busy, which made me want to crawl out of my skin. "We promise we won't be glued to you. But we're here if you want to enjoy the island together. We thought it'd be more fun with more people, that's all. Your father and I get pretty bored on our own." FIL nodded and added, "Yeah, we won't intrude on private time. But you can only lie in bed so many hours of the day, right?" Ha! I was squeezing Jake's hand under the table, silently imploring him to be firmer because I was about to explode. I finally spoke up and tried to sound as polite but firm as possible. "I understand you came a long way and Hawaii is amazing. But to be honest, we were really expecting this trip to be just us. We purposely didn't invite anyone else. Honeymoons are kind of meant for the couple." MIL immediately looked hurt. "We said we'd give you your space. Are you saying you don't want us here at all?" She looked like I told her we hated her or something. Before I could answer, Jake jumped in, probably trying to soften the blow. "It's not that we don't want you here, but, well, yeah, we didn't expect you here. We wanted time for ourselves." FIL frowned and said in a somewhat joking tone, with an edge to it, "So what are we supposed to do? Cancel our trip and fly home because you kids want to play house by yourselves?" I bit my tongue hard. Yes, that's exactly what you're supposed to do, I thought. But I phrased it more gently. "No, of course not. You're already here. I mean, you should enjoy Hawaii. But maybe we can do our own thing separately." MIL then did something that really rubbed me the wrong way. She started tearing up. She dabbed at her eyes and said, "We didn't realize you would be so opposed to spending time with us. This is really hurtful." This is a classic move of hers, emotional guilt trips. I've seen it before over smaller things, like us missing a family dinner. But doing it here, now, on our honeymoon, was next level. The dinner ended shortly after, with a pretty frosty atmosphere. MIL and FIL finished eating quickly, barely talking, and MIL was sniffling like she might actually start sobbing. My husband was quiet and looked deeply uncomfortable. I felt kind of bad, but also like we were the ones who should be upset, not them. When we got back to our room, I unloaded on Jake. I said something like, "This is insane. They are manipulating us. We cannot let them bulldoze our honeymoon like this." He agreed it was way out of line, but he was also feeling guilty because of his mom's tears. He said maybe we can compromise? Like, let's do 1 or 2 activities with them and spend the rest of the time alone. I told him I was worried that if we give an inch, they'll take a mile. From their perspective, they've already decided this is a family vacation. His mom making a reservation for all of us and renting a car to share, etc., that doesn't suggest they plan to give us much space, no matter what they claim. That night, we tried to enjoy some newlywed time, if you get my drift, but even then it was hard to relax. I kept worrying that his parents were literally in the room next door and could probably hear us through the wall if we made any noise. It was mortifying. At one point, I heard Emil's voice in the hallway and I nearly jumped out of bed, instinctively covering myself like she could see us. She couldn't, but my anxiety was through the roof. Needless to say, that put a damper on the mood. The next day, we decided to reclaim our honeymoon as best we could. We had a couples massage booked in the morning, something we pre-planned, and we decided not to tell his parents where we were going. We just left early, dodging them. It felt ridiculous to be sneaking around, but I just wanted a few hours that day where I could pretend it was just us. Of course, that didn't last. Around lunchtime, as we returned from the spa, we literally bumped into Mil and Fil in the lobby. They were dressed for the beach, and Mil exclaimed, "Oh, there you are! We were looking for you. We thought we could all grab lunch at the taco place down the road." I was about to politely decline, but Jake caved, probably because he felt cornered and still had that residual guilt from the previous night. He said, sure, I guess lunch would be okay. I shot him a look, but he gave me a helpless shrug, so we ended up having lunch with him. During lunch, I noticed Mil and Fil acting like nothing was wrong. In fact, they were overcompensating with cheerfulness. Mil was showing us selfies they took that morning at the beach. Fil was talking about how great the weather was. It was so awkward. I was pretty quiet, aside from polite small talk. After eating, Mil said, "Why don't you kids go relax this afternoon, and then we'll do the luau together tonight, like we talked about?" That wasn't a question. It was phrased like a plan. She already had tickets purchased. I responded, "Actually, I think we might do our own thing tonight." Mil pouted, "But we already got the tickets. It'll be a waste if you don't come." At this point, I could see this was going to keep repeating every day unless we put a stop to it. I felt my frustration boiling over. I said, "I'm sorry, but we never asked you to do that. You chose to get tickets assuming we'd join. We have our own plans." My voice was probably sharper than I intended. Mil's eyes hardened a bit and she said, "Fine. If you two want to be alone so badly, we won't bother you. We were just trying to be nice." Fil muttered, "We did pay a lot to be here, you know. We just thought we'd spend time with our son and new daughter-in-law. But do whatever you want." Jake looked really upset by the turn of conversation, and finally, he found his backbone. He said, "Dad, Mom, you showing up here was not okay. We love you, but this is our honeymoon. You should have asked, or really, you should just understand that honeymoons are private. We didn't invite you because we wanted this time for ourselves. If you're going to be here, you have to let us have that." Mil looked at him like he slapped her. "So you don't want us here at all," she said in a quiet, trembly voice. Jake replied, "Honestly, not on our honeymoon, no. It was wrong of you to come. I'm sorry, but that's the truth." I was so proud of him for saying that, because I could tell it was hard for him. Fil's face went red and he said, "Well, fine then. We'll leave you alone. Come on. L's name." He threw some cash on the table for the bill, and they literally got up and left without another word, Mil silently crying behind her sunglasses. That left us sitting there, stunned and feeling kind of like villains, at least in Jake's eyes. He immediately started second-guessing himself, saying, "Maybe I shouldn't have been so harsh." I told him, "No, you had to say it. They were out of line." That afternoon, we didn't see them at all. We did our own thing and tried to salvage the remainder of the day, but there was this tension hanging over us. Sure, we had our space now, but it came at the cost of basically telling his parents to get lost. In their minds, at least. That evening, we found a note slipped under our door from Mil and Fil. It basically said they were going to do their own activities and give us what we want, silence. Yes, phrased exactly like that. And that they'd talk to us when we were ready to apologize for the way we spoke to them. Unbelievable. So now, what was supposed to be an idyllic honeymoon has this cloud over it. Jake and I have had arguments about it too. He is angry at them, but also feels guilty and sad that his relationship with his parents is seemingly damaged now. I'm angry too, but more at his parents than at him. I won't lie, a part of me resents that Jake didn't nip this in the bud immediately when we first found out, but I get that he was caught off guard and conditioned to not upset them. He has since apologized to me for not handling it better from the get-go. We have a few days left here, and I'm not even sure if we'll see his parents again before we leave. They haven't reached out since that note. I'm fine not seeing them, but I know this is going to explode once we're back home. They expect an apology. We feel they should be apologizing. This whole thing is a mess. I never expected our honeymoon to turn into a family feud. I'm furious and sad, and my husband is really down about it too. We're supposed to be basking in newlywed bliss, and instead we're dealing with entitled parent drama. So Reddit, what do we even do now? How do we handle this moving forward? Do we try to smooth things over just for the sake of peace, or stand our ground and risk a major rift? I feel like this is so far beyond normal boundaries that it's hard to just forgive and forget. Any advice would be appreciated. We have a long flight home soon, and I'm dreading what's waiting for us on the other side. I'll update when I can, once things progress. Right now, I just needed to get all this off my chest. Update 1. Hi everyone, we're back from our honeymoon, and as expected, the situation with my in-laws blew up. Thank you for all the comments on my original post. They gave us courage to stand our ground. A couple days after we got home, my husband Jake and I went to talk to his parents in person. They had basically summoned us for a face-to-face. It went, well, poorly is an understatement. The moment we sat down in their living room, Faya lit into us about how unacceptable our treatment of them was in Hawaii. According to him, we abandoned and humiliated them, and they'd never been so disrespected. Emael was on the couch, quietly crying, and when she spoke, it was to tell Jake how hurt she was that her own son didn't want her around on his honeymoon. The vibe was very much that we were ungrateful children being scolded. We tried to explain our side, that showing up uninvited to someone's honeymoon is a huge boundary crossing, that we never intended to hurt them, but they put us in a terrible position. We pointed out that we had no alone time until we finally put our foot down. Unfortunately, none of that got through to them. They basically brushed our feelings aside. FIL kept insisting they only wanted to share in our joy, and that we were selfish for not sparing a few days for them after all they've done for Jake. He even accused me of turning his son against his family. That made me extremely angry, but I held my tongue. Jake defended me and himself. He told his parents, as calmly as he could, that we don't feel sorry for insisting on privacy during our honeymoon, and that they should never have intruded. He said something like, "I'm an adult and a husband now, and you need to respect that we'll have our own life and boundaries." This only seemed to make Fel more upset. Mil sobbed that she never thought her son would shut them out like this, and that I've changed him. She said, "Everything is different now that you're married," and kept crying about how she felt left out and abandoned. I did feel a pang of sympathy because I can see it's hard for her to adjust, but at the same time, come on. Crashing someone's honeymoon is not how you handle empty nest feelings. The conversation went in circles for over an hour. It was exhausting and, honestly, pretty traumatizing. Every time we tried to make a point, they'd twist it back on how we hurt them. It ended with FIL saying something like, "If you two won't apologize for your behavior, then maybe you shouldn't come around for a while," and MIL crying that we'd broken her heart. Basically, we were told to leave if we weren't going to beg forgiveness. So we left. Since that confrontation, we haven't spoken directly. The fallout, however, is spreading through the family. One of Jake's brothers texted him, saying, quote, "Mom is really upset and saying you two treated them like dirt in Hawaii." So they've definitely told their one-sided version to everyone. We haven't even begun to figure out how to handle that. We're considering sending a message to close family just to clarify our side, at least in broad strokes, because I hate the idea of everyone thinking we're awful people. On the other hand, engaging in the gossip chain might just add fuel. One example, a cousin of Jake's heard a warped version of events, that we kicked his poor aunt and uncle out of our honeymoon, and sent me a scathing message about how family always comes first. I haven't responded. It's infuriating to have our side so misrepresented, but getting into a he said/she said with extended family is the last thing I need right now. We'll set the record straight if we have to, but for now, we're venting to a few sympathetic family members and otherwise keeping quiet. At this point, Jake and I are united. We're not apologizing. We firmly believe we did nothing wrong by wanting a solo honeymoon. If anything, his parents owe us a huge apology. Given their reaction, though, I doubt they see it that way. Jake is pretty down about the whole thing. He said he never imagined starting married life with a rift between him and his folks. I feel terrible for him, but I also know that if we'd caved to his parents' behavior, we'd be setting a precedent for the future, and probably resenting each other. He agrees. It's just a crappy situation all around. For now, we're giving his mom and dad some space and going low contact. Maybe time will cool them off or give them perspective. One can hope. On our end, we're focusing on us, our marriage, and mental health. We've also gotten support from a few family members who know the full story and agree we did nothing wrong. That validation helps. I'll post another update when there's more to report. As of now, we're just trying to pick up the pieces and figure out how to move forward. It's such a mess, but we're sticking together through it. We don't regret standing our ground, but it really sucks that it came to this. Update 2. Final. It's been a few more weeks, and I wish I had a happier update, but here we are. The rift with my in-laws hasn't healed. In fact, it might be getting worse. After that big confrontation, Jake and I basically went low contact. None of us reached out, and there was radio silence for a while. We skipped the usual Sunday dinner with his family, which felt strange and sad. Jake's younger brother tried to play peacemaker at one point, suggesting we all sit down again. But neither side seemed ready. Honestly, I think his parents are waiting for us to crawl back and apologize, and we're not going to do that. And we were waiting for them to acknowledge they crossed a line, which they obviously still don't see. One particularly painful moment. A couple of weeks ago, MIL left a box on our doorstep. Inside were some family photos, pictures of Jake with his parents and brothers from years past, even a few baby pictures. There was a note in MIL's handwriting that said, "Since you don't want us in your life right now, you might want these." I'll admit, that note made me sob, and it utterly wrecked my husband. It felt like she was saying, "Fine, you don't have parents anymore." It was so dramatic and hurtful. We didn't respond to the note because we didn't know what to say. How do you even begin to answer that? This whole ordeal has weighed heavily on Jake. I've caught him looking through those old photos more than once, just quiet and sad. I know he misses the way things were, or maybe the way he wishes they could be. It breaks my heart. I keep reassuring him that he's not a bad son for drawing boundaries, and that I'm proud of him for standing up for us. But he's grieving, I think. Grieving the normal, loving relationship he thought he had, or hoped to have, with his mom and dad. As for me, I'm cycling through anger, sadness, and disbelief. Sometimes I feel guilty, wondering if there was a way we could have avoided all this drama. But then, I remind myself that we didn't create this mess. Wanting a honeymoon alone is completely reasonable. They're the ones who stomped on that boundary. Extended family is still chirping in our ears. We calmly told my husband's brothers our side of the story. One of them was actually very understanding and told their parents to chill out, and that we did nothing wrong. The other brother is more neutral. He hates conflict and just wants everyone to make up, but he doesn't quite grasp how extreme his parents' actions were. A few relatives have urged us to apologize, just to keep the peace. Easy to say when they're not the ones who had their honeymoon crashed. At this point, we've accepted that an apology or understanding from my in-laws may never come. We're trying to move forward with that reality. It's a bitter pill for Jake especially. He loves his parents, but he also sees how toxic their behavior was and he refuses to enable it now. We've talked about maybe going to family therapy or having a mediated conversation eventually, but his parents would have to agree to that first. Given how they're acting, that seems unlikely for now. For the time being, we're focusing on each other. Despite all this drama, our marriage is solid. If anything, going through this together has made us an even stronger team.